The snow whispers his name. Hey guys, today we begin our story in the high mountain forests of northern Idaho, where the snow clings to tree limbs like lace and the wind carries secrets only animals seem to understand. On mornings like this, even the smallest movement leaves behind a whisper, a trail of paw prints pressed into frost, the creak of pine as a predator wakes. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes out here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, what time is it where you are right now? And what's the weather outside your window? The air is thin and breathes cold as it rolls through the Bitterroot foothills just west of Elk City. It's early March, and the last storms of winter still drift lazily across the ridgelines. Inside the modest cluster of buildings that make up the Sagewind Wildlife Clinic, 62-year-old Dr. Evelyn Marison wraps her weathered fingers around a thermos of peppermint tea. Her gray braid is tucked into the collar of her windproof vest, and the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes deepen as she reads the morning's intake reports. She doesn't yet know the day will bring something her decades of fieldwork never prepared her for. Down a gravel path, past rows of enclosures ringed in pine branches and straw bales, one pen sits still. It belongs to a North American bobcat named Thorn, a large male with rust and slate fur, pale spotting across his haunches, and ears tipped in the black tufts characteristic of his kind. His tail, barely 6 inches long, flicks once as he scans the woods beyond his fence. At 2 years old, Thorn should be ready for release. He's healed from a deep leg laceration caused by a poacher's snare, and his gait is nearly flawless now. He hunts enrichment mice with minimal interest in the humans that feed him and refuses all touch. He is, by every measure, beautifully wild. But this morning, he is unsettled. Thorn has been pacing since dawn, muscles tensing beneath his winter coat, nose raised to the wind. He pauses only to stare toward the east wing of the clinic, where the air vents exhale faint, unfamiliar scents. His amber eyes narrow. Something is wrong. Bobcats, though solitary, are sensory creatures. They can detect a rabbit's heartbeat in the underbrush from 10 feet away. But what Thorn smells now isn't prey. It's something smaller, softer, crying. At 8:17 a.m., the clinic's outer door swings open. A teenager with flushed cheeks and tangled red hair cradles something wrapped in a towel. Evelyn looks up from her clipboard. "Please," the girl stammers. "He won't stop crying." In her arms is a kitten, barely 3 weeks old, fur as white as hoarfrost, limbs trembling. Its eyes are still the cloudy blue of the newborn, its ribs visible beneath fragile skin. The girl, Jordan Silas, says she found it crying beneath their porch, alone, cold, with no sign of a mother. The local animal shelter turned them away. They were full, she says, voice cracking. He was shaking, Jordan whispers, like he was scared of being alive. Evelyn doesn't hesitate. She takes the bundle, notes the shallow breathing, the crackle in the lungs. Severe respiratory infection. Hypothermia, likely dehydration, maybe hours left. She speaks gently. "We'll try. He's a fighter." Down the hallway, technician Sabrina Inez, 29, is already prepping a heat pad and kitten formula. Together, they work in practiced silence, administering antibiotics, fluid injections, glucose for shock. When Evelyn asks about a name, Jordan says softly, "I called him Sprig because he's tiny, like the first green thing after winter." Sprig doesn't respond. He lies still except for the rasp of each breath, the occasional squeak like a broken reed. By noon, he's stabilized, but barely. As the humans move about their routines, across the compound, Thorn stops pacing. He's heard something, a whimper, barely audible to the human ear, but to him unmistakable. His pupils narrow, his chest rises and falls in a slow rhythm as he begins to churr. That sound, a soft, chuffing trill, is one most bobcats reserve for their young. A sound to comfort. A sound no one at Sagewind has ever heard from Thorn. Evelyn notices. So does Sabrina. He's watching the wall, she murmurs, like he knows what's behind it. At first, the staff dismisses it as coincidence. Thorn is, after all, a predator. But as the hours unfold, his behavior becomes more pronounced. He refuses food unless he's facing the direction of the clinic. He growls, not in aggression, but in protest, when staff enter the treatment room where Sprig is kept. And most startling of all, when a student intern accidentally wheels Sprig's incubator past the enclosure on the way to another room, Thorn presses himself against the mesh, tail flicking in concern. Sprig, barely conscious, lets out a squeaky mewl. Thorn churs again and does not look away. Later, Evelyn stands by Thorn's enclosure as snow begins to fall lightly on the pine mulch. She watches him settle near the mesh, ears angled toward the clinic, body curled in a half-moon. He hasn't done that since he arrived, she says. Sabrina nods slowly. He's waiting. But for what? Evelyn whispers. A storm drifts in over the ridgeline, smudging the horizon with mist. Somewhere inside, the kitten sleeps fitfully, unaware of the eyes guarding him through concrete and wire. Outside, the wildcat who should be gone in a week's time lies still in the snow, listening for a heartbeat that does not belong to him, but may be the only one he trusts. A cry beneath the porch. The snow was still falling when Evelyn closed the intake log and returned to the treatment room. The little bundle on the warming pad hadn't moved much, but his breathing had evened out slightly. A shallow rhythm, as if he were floating somewhere between worlds. Beside him, a drip bag hung from a metal stand, delivering a slow, steady stream of fluids through the thinnest needle they had. Sprig. Evelyn spoke the name softly, almost like a promise. He was impossibly small. His tiny paws, no bigger than river pebbles, curled and twitched occasionally in his sleep, a reflex more instinct than intention. His coat, though still patchy from malnutrition, held a faint sheen now under the incubator's glow. But his temperature hovered just below survivable, and the infection crackled in his lungs like damp tinder. In another room, Jordan Silas sat with her father, shoulders hunched beneath an oversized coat. She hadn't stopped crying since they arrived. At 14, she had found the kitten by chance, drawn by faint sounds beneath the porch while feeding chickens. There were feathers, she had said, her voice catching, like a hawk maybe got the mother, or something worse. Jordan had begged her dad to drive the kitten into town. The animal hospital had turned them away. That's when she remembered Sagewind. She had seen a flyer once. Injured raptors, orphaned elk calves. Wild animals brought back from the brink. They don't do cats, her father had warned, but she wouldn't let it go. Now Evelyn stepped into the hallway, arms crossed, gaze steady. He's stable for now, she told them. But it's minute to minute. Jordan nodded, blinking fast. Can I leave my number? Of course, we'll update you either way. Outside the window, the clouds broke briefly, letting a shaft of sunlight touch the frozen path. A crow called once from the trees. Evelyn turned back toward the treatment room, already calculating feeding schedules and antibiotic intervals. Neonates this week needed round-the-clock care, every 2 hours. That included overnight shifts. She found Sabrina in the supply room assembling feeding syringes. The younger woman's dark hair was pulled into a tired bun, and the sleeves of her sweatshirt were damp from thawed bedding. "I'll take first watch," Sabrina said, reading Evelyn's look. "I figured you would." A minute later, the two women stood again beside the incubator. They had no choice but to break protocol. Domestic animals weren't usually housed at Sagewind. They risked cross-contamination, habituation, and confusion for the wildlife in recovery. But sending Sprig away now was a death sentence. "He stays," Evelyn said, "at least until the fever breaks." In the outdoor enclosure, Thorn rose to his feet. The sun had briefly gilded the mesh of his pen, and he stood in its center, ears pricked toward the clinic's eastern wing. He inhaled deeply. Then, slowly, the bobcat began to pace again, not with agitation, but purpose. Bobcats are solitary creatures by nature. Males like Thorn roam territories up to 30 square miles, marking their boundaries with scrapes and scent. They mate briefly, then vanish. They do not raise young. And yet, inside the walls of this clinic, something primal stirs in him, something the staff can neither name nor deny. It begins as a low trill, barely audible. By evening, Thorn is vocalizing continuously, churs, growls, and warbling whimpers. He does not eat. He does not rest. He circles the mesh, pausing only when the wind carries Sprig's faint cries across the yard. No one expected this. Not from him. Not from any wild predator. At 2 a.m., Evelyn returns for the graveyard shift and finds Thorn still awake, his amber eyes glowing in the moonlight like lanterns. She stands in silence for a long time, unsure what to make of it. A sick kitten, a wild bobcat, one near death, the other nearly free. And yet, she places a gloved hand on the wooden railing beside the mesh. Thorn doesn't flinch. He barely looks at her, his gaze trained on the building behind her, where Sprig's tiny lungs continue their rattled struggle. "What's in your head, wild one?" she whispers. The wind answers with a soft hush through the fir trees. Somewhere far off, a coyote calls and is met with silence. Thorn turns away, circles twice, then lays down at the mesh, right where the scent of the kitten is strongest. His chest rises and falls slowly, waiting, watching. Inside, Sprig stirs, letting out a whimper so faint it barely registers on the room's baby monitor. Sabrina, curled on the floor in her sleeping bag, opens her eyes. She peers over the edge of the table and smiles faintly. "Still fighting," she murmurs. "You're a strange little miracle." Neither she nor Evelyn yet understands what's forming between the two lives they're trying to keep alive. One feral, one fragile. But soon, the whole center will have to choose between protocol and something far more mysterious. Wilder eyes in the mesh morning arrive slowly at Sagewind, light seeping into the mist like breath rising from warm ground. The snow has stopped. A hush holds the forest as the trees drip quietly under their new weight. Inside the treatment room, Sprig mews, weak but persistent. Sabrina leans over him with a half-filled syringe, coaxing him to drink. The kitten latches on this time, not strong but eager, and that alone is worth a cheer she doesn't give voice to. She knows how delicate these moments are. Hope is not something you speak aloud too early. Then, from down the hall, a sharp, rhythmic sound breaks the quiet. Metal on wood. It's Thorn, pawing at the mesh of his enclosure. Evelyn arrives just minutes later, called by Sabrina's radio message. She crosses the back courtyard, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other, expecting a routine update. She finds something else entirely. Thorn is no longer the aloof predator they've come to know. Instead, he's planted against the front of his enclosure, body pressed low, head tilted toward the direction of the clinic's rear wing. His ears are forward, eyes intense, not in a hunting stance, but something softer, stranger. As Evelyn approaches, he makes a sound she's never heard from him, a churring trill, drawn out like a lullaby. A few feet away, Sabrina exits the rear wing carrying Sprig's incubator for his morning weigh-in. When she passes near Thorn's enclosure, everything changes. The bobcat stands, not to stalk, not to lunge, but to follow. He moves alongside the glass, pacing in time with the rolling cart. His vocalizations increase, soft, coaxing, almost conversational. It's as though he recognizes Sprig. Not by sight. He couldn't have seen him before, but by something deeper. Smell, sound, energy. Sabrina stops, one hand gripping the incubator. She looks toward Evelyn, who watches in stunned silence. Is he? Sabrina doesn't finish. Evelyn steps forward, studying Thorn's body language, ears up, tail relaxed, posture low but not crouching, not a predator, not a threat. Move the kitten a few feet away, she says softly. Sabrina does. Immediately, Thorn's posture changes. He vocalizes again, louder, more insistent. He presses a paw to the mesh, claws retracted. Bring him closer, Evelyn says. As the incubator rolls back within view, Thorn calms instantly. He churs again. Then he lies down, front legs extended. Eyes trained on Sprig through the glass. In her 38 years as a wildlife vet, Evelyn Marison has never seen anything like it. We need to record this, she murmurs. They begin documenting Thorn's behavior every time Sprig is nearby. Over the next 2 days, the pattern holds. Thorn vocalizes when Sprig cries. He refuses food when the kitten is taken out of the room. He relaxes completely when Sprig is returned. And most remarkably, when the kitten's breathing falters during a fever spike on the 3rd night, Thorn lets out a sustained, haunting wail, long and mournful, echoing through the rafters of the clinic. Evelyn stays late into the night, reviewing wildlife behavior guides and species-specific research. None of it explains what she's seeing. Bobcats do not imprint on domestic cats. They do not adopt young from other species. They certainly don't bond across barriers. But Thorn does. Whether it's instinct, grief, or something the textbooks haven't named yet, he is guarding Sprig with the unshakable focus of a mother. Or a soul that has lost something before and won't let it happen again. The next morning, Evelyn pulls the intake file from Thorn's admission. A detail she had missed before now leaps off the page. The hiker who found him had also discovered the body of a female bobcat nearby, killed, most likely, by another predator. It's possible she was Thorn's mate. Or at least a familiar scent in his territory. The bond could have been brief, as wildcat unions often are, but in a world where solitude is survival, any loss might echo louder. What if he lost something? She says aloud. And this kitten woke that memory up? Later that day, during a volunteer meeting, the staff discussed the implications. One technician, Nolan Reese, a behavioral science major from Boise State, raises a hand. There's precedent, he says. In primates. Elephants, too. Animals showing displaced maternal behaviors after trauma, sometimes even toward other species. But a bobcat? Evelyn asks. Nolan shrugs. No known cases. But then again, no one's been watching for them. They begin calling in experts, wildlife biologists, behaviorists, a representative from the Idaho Department of Fish and Game. Responses vary from intrigue to skepticism. You're anthropomorphizing, one professor warns on a call. Be careful not to confuse survival behaviors with emotion. But his cortisol levels drop when the kitten is near, Evelyn counters. That's not imagined. By week's end, the debate is no longer whether the bond is real. It's what to do about it. Sprig is growing stronger. His lungs are clearing. His mews are louder, more determined. He pounces weakly at his bottle during feedings and tries to climb Sabrina's sweatshirt. He is, for the first time in his life, thriving. And every step of the way, Thorn is watching. One paw always near the glass. One eye always on the kitten. That night, as moonlight casts silver shadows across the snow, Evelyn finds herself lingering by Thorn's enclosure long after the rounds are finished. Sprig is sleeping. Thorn is not. He lies near the wall, body curled like a sentinel, amber eyes glinting with something no chart can measure. You're not just a case study, Evelyn whispers. And this isn't just science. In the stillness, the bobcat lifts his head and lets out a sound that is neither wild nor tame, but something entirely new, something we may never fully understand. Too wild to love. By the 10th day, what had started as a mystery has become a quiet center of gravity at Sagewind. Staff pause outside Thorn's enclosure to watch the same ritual play out each morning. The bobcat pressed against the mesh, tail slow sweeping behind him, eyes locked on Sprig's incubator. Sprig, now 5 weeks old, has begun responding, not just to bottle feedings, but to Thorn himself. When wheeled close to the enclosure, he purrs audibly. He places both paws against the glass, tiny pads mirroring the much larger print on the other side. It is a picture few would believe if they hadn't seen it themselves. The wild predator and the orphaned kitten, separated by wire and plexiglass, but somehow emotionally tethered. Sagewind's senior wildlife handler, Marcus Elm, has seen bobcats that tore through enclosures, lashed out at caregivers, and never once made eye contact with another living soul. Thorn, by all historical measures, should be one of them. He was found with a trap wound so severe it nearly required amputation. For weeks he refused food, unless it was hidden in branches or buried in straw, never from a human's hand. I thought he'd be the last animal on Earth to form a bond, Marcus admits one afternoon, arms folded as he observes the pair. He wouldn't even look at us. Now Thorn not only looks, he watches. He follows Sprig's every movement with unwavering calm. And more than that, he reacts. When Sprig sneezes or cries during medicine administration, Thorn's whole body stiffens. If the kitten sleeps, the bobcat relaxes. It's not subtle anymore. It's care. The protocol tension is growing. Evelyn knows the rules. No interspecies pairing. No non-native companions for animals meant for release. No emotional enmeshment, even among wild species, if it compromises their future. We're not here to create stories, she tells the staff in a meeting that feels half-hearted even to her ears. We're here to rehabilitate, then release. But Marcus speaks up. Maybe this is rehabilitation, just not the kind we're used to. Sabrina nods. Thorn's eating again, but only when Sprig's nearby. If we separate them completely, we risk regression for both. And it's true. The one time they moved Sprig to a temporary foster just overnight. Thorn refused food for 36 hours. paced constantly and vocalized until he collapsed in exhaustion. When the kitten returned, the bobcat visibly relaxed. He even groomed himself, something he hadn't done since his capture. That moment sticks with Evelyn, not because grooming is rare, but because of what it signals in wild animals. Safety, contentment, home. But where is home for Thorn now? Is it the forest, where he once limped and bled and likely watched another bobcat die? Or is it here, beside a creature not of his world, but stitched somehow into his new one? She reaches out to Lydia Sorrell, an old colleague and director of Silver Hollow Refuge, a permanent wildlife sanctuary in the Sawtooth Range. Lydia is known for her work with emotionally complex cases. Wolves with PTSD, hawks who imprint on human handlers, mountain lions with inexplicable phobias. Evelyn tells her everything: the trap, the kitten, the bond, the impossibility of it all. Lydia listens in silence, then says, "You have a trauma-linked alloparental response. Maybe a grief transfer, maybe something stranger. Either way, if you separate them, it may do more harm than good. But I can't justify keeping Thorn from release." Evelyn replies, "His body is ready." "Then ask yourself what his mind needs," Lydia says. Wild doesn't always mean alone. Back at the center, Thorn is undergoing his final pre-release assessment. He passes every physical benchmark: strength, balance, reflex, scent tracking, food aversion to humans. He is a textbook success, except for one thing. Each time Sprig is out of view, his vitals spike. Heart rate, stress hormones, pacing duration, all increase. Marcus compiles the data. Sabrina collects video. Nolan drafts a report to Idaho Fish and Game. But it's not science that shifts the conversation. It's a moment. It happens on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Sprig, now exploring under staff supervision, wriggles out of Sabrina's hands during a weigh-in. He tumbles to the floor and lets out a high-pitched squeal, one of fear, not pain. Before anyone can react, Thorn explodes against the mesh of his enclosure with a force none of them have ever seen. The steel frame rattles, the roof trembles. He cries out, a sharp, guttural roar, not meant for intimidation, but warning. Everyone in the room freezes. Sprig is scooped up unharmed, but Thorn does not calm until the kitten is returned to his line of sight. Only then does he stop pacing. Only then does his breathing slow. It is not instinct. It is not routine. It is protection. Evelyn stands in the center of the treatment room, heart pounding, papers shaking in her hand. "This can't continue," she says softly. But she knows, even as she says it, what can't often means is what we haven't dared to allow. Later that night, she writes a letter to Lydia Sorrell. Subject line: alternate placement inquiry. Urgent. Inside the email, she includes everything: the data, the videos, the behavior logs. She asks the question she never thought she'd ask. What does responsible release look like when the wild animal no longer wants to go? She doesn't expect an answer right away. But she hopes, quietly, that there's a place for Thorn and Sprig where the rules aren't so rigid, where healing doesn't have to look like solitude. Outside, the rain tapers off. The trees drip softly, and the moon emerges between the clouds. In his enclosure, Thorn sleeps curled against the mesh. And on the other side of the wall, Sprig dreams beneath a warming lamp, his small body safe in the quiet hum of something rare. Belonging, when science doesn't know why. The reply comes the next morning. Evelyn sits in her office long before the others arrive, her tea untouched. Lydia's email is brief, thoughtful, and exacting, as she always is. If Thorn is choosing connection over release, that is no failure. It is a shift. A wild animal doesn't cease being wild because it forms a bond. But we must ask, does this bond serve his well-being? And what does the animal himself believe about his place in the world? The question lingers in the quiet like smoke. What does Thorn believe? Outside, the forest is beginning to thaw. Icicles drip from pine needles. Mud is returning to the paths between enclosures. Even the ravens sound different. Less sharp, more curious. Spring is coming, and with it, decisions. By lunchtime, the whole staff is gathered. Evelyn has printed behavior graphs and hormone charts. Nolan has compiled comparative case studies. Everything from orphaned foxes imprinting on badgers to interspecies grooming in zoo-born elephants. But it isn't data that moves the room. It's the still frames. Photographs Sabrina took over the last 2 weeks. Sprig pressing his tiny paw to the glass. Thorn mirroring the gesture, his massive paw splayed like a protective shield. One shot shows the bobcat curled in a defensive posture beside the mesh, nose to the glass, eyes closed as if in meditation. Another shows Sprig, mid-yawn, turning toward that same patch of mesh with uncharacteristic ease. No fear, no startle, just trust. Evelyn gestures toward the photos. This isn't science fiction. It's just science we haven't fully explained yet. A quiet settles over the room. Then Marcus speaks. Would you call this love? No one answers at first. Sabrina, seated cross-legged beside the table, finally murmurs, if this isn't love, it's something close enough to protect. Evelyn nods, lips tight. Whatever it is, it's real, which means we owe it serious consideration. And so they do. Over the next 3 days, every staff member participates in a full reevaluation. Thorn's response to Sprig is logged during different hours, environments, and proximity scenarios. The kitten is moved in and out of his view. His vocalizations are measured. His food intake charted. Blood tests are done for both animals. Thorn's cortisol levels drop an average of 27% when Sprig is present. His aggression disappears entirely. The numbers are clear. Emotion is having a biological impact. Still, not everyone agrees. A visiting field biologist, Dr. Malik Renner, delivers a blunt caution. This isn't a Disney film. You're seeing grief displacement. It's temporary. But the bond is sustaining both of them, Nolan counters. Renner shrugs. For now. But what if for now becomes forever? Sabrina asks. Renner doesn't answer. That night, Evelyn finds herself walking the perimeter of Thorn's enclosure. The moon is a silver cutout behind wisps of mist, the ground wet with meltwater. She can see the bobcat clearly, sitting still, head up, as if waiting for something beyond instinct. She stops by the glass. I don't know what this is, she tells him, but I believe you do. Thorn doesn't move, but he blinks slowly. A soft trill vibrates in his throat. Across the path, Sprig stirs in his incubator, letting out a chirp that sounds like a question. He isn't crying anymore. These days, he chirps, he explores, he climbs. They meet again the next morning, closer now, with only 2 barriers between them. One is mesh, the other is human caution. The moment is quiet. No one speaks as Sprig is placed in his viewing crate and wheeled beside the enclosure. Thorn approaches immediately, lowering his body to the glass. Sprig paces, tail up, brushing the crate walls with playful confidence. He doesn't seem to notice the bobcat's size. Or maybe he does, and trusts it. The moment passes without fanfare. No roaring, no drama, just the kind of comfort that doesn't need explanation. Later that afternoon, a decision is made. Evelyn calls Lydia again, but she's not the only one on the line. Joining the conference call is Tessa Raines, a director at Long Pines Sanctuary in Montana. The facility specializes in non-releasable wildcats with behavioral anomalies, territorial trauma, failed releases, or human imprinting that complicates survival. Tessa has heard about Thorn. "I'll drive down myself," she says. "I want to see it with my own eyes." When she arrives the next day, wind is curling through the aspen trees outside the clinic. She watches the two animals for nearly an hour in total silence, noting every posture, every pause. She even asks to observe during feeding. "They mirror each other," she finally says, "like bonded pairs do. We've seen this in sibling cougars, in lynx that lose mates, but never like this. Never across species." Evelyn asks the question that's been pressing for weeks. "Would you consider taking them both?" Tessa nods slowly. "If the permit board agrees, yes. I'd need separate feeding systems, a dual enclosure corridor. But yes, I'd be honored." Sabrina exhales deeply. Marcus closes his eyes for a moment. Nolan smiles. Evelyn just stands very still. There's more paperwork to come. More reviews, signatures, permissions, but the path is opening. And this time, it doesn't lead to release. It leads to refuge. That night, the team gathers outside Thorn's enclosure for the first time without questions, only quiet acknowledgement. They bring Sprig in his crate, set it near the mesh, and wait. Thorn approaches immediately. Sprig chirps, and this time, the kitten reaches his paw through the bars. Thorn, gently, leans his forehead to the mesh. Two beings, no words. But the connection is there. Science can name the hormones, chart the data, graph the timelines. But no study can yet explain why, when faced with loss, a creature built for solitude chooses love. Only that sometimes they do. The impossible prescription. It begins as a whisper. Just past midnight, as frost blooms on the clinic windows and even the ravens have gone quiet, Sprig's breathing falters. Sabrina, curled in a blanket beside his incubator, sits upright in an instant. The sound is unmistakable, a wet, rattling wheeze that cuts through the room like a shiver. She calls Evelyn immediately. Within minutes, both women are hovering over the kitten, listening, measuring, adjusting the oxygen flow. "He's crashing," Evelyn says, voice taut. "His lungs aren't clearing. His body's too small to fight this much longer." Sabrina nods, her hands trembling. "I don't think he'll make it until dawn. They've done everything. Antibiotics, heat, hydration, nutrition. Sprig is receiving every intervention a fragile neonate can tolerate. But his breathing is labored. His temperature drops a fraction. His eyelids flutter." Evelyn closes her stethoscope slowly. Sometimes, especially with animals this young, the body just gives up. Sabrina swallows hard, blinking fast. There has to be something else. A silence settles over the room like mist. The clock ticks. The heater hums. Sprig lets out a tiny squeak, more vibration than voice. Then comes the sound they've come to know too well, a low, mournful whine from the outdoor corridor. Thorn. He's been vocalizing again since sundown, refusing his food, pacing the wire, his body alert to something the humans can't sense. Sabrina turns to Evelyn. "He knows. I know he does." And then she says it. "What if we try proximity?" Evelyn looks up sharply. "You mean put the incubator near Thorn?" "Not in the enclosure," Sabrina says quickly. "Just near. Like we did before, only closer. Maybe his presence will stabilize Sprig, or calm whatever's happening in his nervous system. Evelyn hesitates. There's no clinical data to support that. Does it matter? Sabrina's voice is barely a whisper. He's dying, and Thorne's been trying to get to him all night. Evelyn doesn't reply immediately. Her instincts, honed over years of rigid protocol and cautious science, scream against the idea. But something deeper, something older, softens her resistance. I'll monitor his vitals, constantly. If anything goes wrong, we pull him back. Sabrina nods. 15 minutes later, wrapped in warming pads and secured inside his sealed incubator, Sprig is wheeled slowly out of the clinic's rear entrance. The cold stings briefly before the heat lamp re-engages, casting a soft orange glow over the kitten's pale fur. Thorne sees him immediately. The bobcat stands at full height, pressing close to the mesh. He makes no sound. He only stares, his eyes burning amber beneath the moonlight. Sabrina positions the incubator just 2 feet from the wire, far enough for safety, close enough for contact. Thorne lowers himself slowly to the ground. Then, with a deep exhale, he lies down. He begins to purr. Not the contented rumble of a domestic cat, but something deeper, a primal vibration that resonates through his entire body and hums into the quiet night air like a healing chant. Inside the incubator, Sprig twitches. A paw shifts. His nose wrinkles. His breathing, though still raspy, gains rhythm. Evelyn checks the monitor. Temperature's rising, she says, voice low, respiration slowing. They watch for another hour. No spikes, no distress, no crying. Only the bobcat purring in silence, and the kitten holding on. By 3:42 a.m., Sprig opens both eyes and lifts his head, weakly, but purposefully. He noses the side of the incubator, his tiny body rising with effort to press against the warmth of the light, and more impossibly, toward the shadow of the cat who guards him like a promise. Evelyn doesn't look at Sabrina. She doesn't have to. At dawn, the sun spills gold over the treetops. Icicles drip from eaves. And inside the incubator, Sprig takes his formula from a syringe for the first time in 2 days. 3 long, desperate drops that fall like grace. Thorne watches the whole time. He doesn't eat, doesn't move, just keeps vigil. Later that morning, Marcus joins them at the enclosure. He's been briefed, but seeing it in person changes everything. This is medicine, he says finally, watching Thorne nudge his paw gently toward the glass. Not in any textbook I've ever read, Evelyn replies. That's because it's written in something older than ink. She nods. Instinct? No, Marcus says. Devotion. They keep the setup for the next 48 hours. Evelyn records every vital. Sabrina logs every feeding. Thorne never leaves his post. When Sprig sleeps, Thorne rests. When Sprig cries, Thorne churs back. The clinic feels quieter during those days, as if even the other animals understand that something sacred is taking place. It isn't a cure, it's a tether. And sometimes that's what saves us. By the 3rd morning, Sprig is strong enough to walk unassisted. His fur is fuller. His gait is clumsy but determined. When he sees Thorne, he squeaks, not in pain, but delight. A staff member jokingly refers to the bobcat as Dad. No one laughs. Not because it's wrong, but because it might be the truest word anyone has spoken. The bond, whatever its origin, is now undeniable. Even the skeptics, like Renner, quiet their protests. This will need to be published, he admits to Evelyn in a quiet hallway. It's beyond precedent. But Evelyn doesn't care about publication or precedent. She cares that Sprig is alive, that Thorn is calm, that somewhere in the wilderness of this strange and brutal world, two souls have found each other. Not despite their difference, but because of it. One paw between them. It's early evening, and the mountains are turning blue at the edges, the way they only do in spring, when snow still clings to the shadows, but the earth beneath begins to remember how to breathe. Sprig is thriving now. He weighs just over a pound, his breathing clear, his gait more confident with each passing day. His fur has fluffed out into a velvety white coat, spotted faintly with cream. His eyes, once clouded by fever and fear, now shimmer a bright, unfiltered blue. He plays, he pounces, he chirps, but only when Thorn is near. The bond has become a rhythm. Twice a day, Sprig is wheeled outside in a reinforced crate lined with fleece and warmed with portable heat packs. He knows the route by now and begins to mewl excitedly as soon as the doors open. By the time he reaches the familiar place just outside Thorn's enclosure, he's alert and vocal, pressing his face to the viewing window, tail twitching with anticipation. Thorn is always waiting. Always. His routine has become equally predictable. As soon as he hears the latch click open, he rises from wherever he's resting, usually by the far wall, and moves to the mesh. He doesn't rush. He doesn't call. He simply waits for the moment when their eyes meet. Then, with something close to reverence, he lowers his massive body to the ground and stretches out along the glass. Sometimes he churrs. Sometimes he simply purrs. But always, he extends one paw, pressing it gently to the barrier between them. Sprig mirrors him. They lie like that for minutes, sometimes an hour. The world moves around them, but they remain still, connected. On the fifth morning of this new routine, Evelyn introduces a new element, a short-handled enrichment brush designed to simulate grooming. "Let's see what happens," she tells Sabrina, who carefully opens a tiny hatch on Sprig's crate. She reaches in, gently brushing the kitten's shoulders. He mews in protest, until she moves the brush to the side of his face. He begins to purr. At the exact same moment, Thorn responds, churring low and placing his face against the mesh, mirroring the motion. It's the first time Evelyn writes the word synchronized in her behavioral notes. Later that day, the team reviews the data again. Vital signs, feeding logs, audio recordings. Every pattern points to a shared emotional state. When one relaxes, the other does. When one becomes anxious, the other responds. When they're separated for more than 2 hours, Sprig becomes quiet, hesitant. Thorn paces. Marcus leans back in his chair during the meeting, arms crossed. "This isn't transference. It's not temporary." Evelyn nods. "I know. So what's the next step?" The question sits there, unspoken in its full complexity. Because the next step, if they're honest, breaks every guideline they've followed since opening Sagewind. It redefines what wildlife rehabilitation can look like. It asks them to make room for something science hasn't mapped yet. It asks them to choose care over classification, to choose love. Sabrina is the first to say it. "We can't release him. It's not defiance, it's not sentimentality, it's clarity. He'll survive," she continues, "but he won't thrive. Not out there. Not without him." She doesn't need to point to Sprig. Everyone in the room knows who him is. Nolan has already begun researching alternative placements, facilities that specialize in unique bonds, sanctuaries that accommodate emotionally complex wildcats. He has a short list, very short. But one name keeps rising to the top: Long Pines Sanctuary, where Tessa Raines has already expressed interest in a site visit. I trust her, Evelyn says. She's done this before. Not this, exactly. Nothing quite like this, but close enough. The site visit is scheduled for the following week. Until then, the routine continues. Sprig and Thorn, twice daily, always supervised, always documented, and always the same quiet miracle. It happens again on a cool Thursday morning. Sprig is carried out in a new harness designed for slightly more mobility. He's strong enough now to walk in short, supervised bursts. As soon as he sees the familiar enclosure, he leaps forward, front paws slamming playfully against the mesh. Thorn jumps too, but not in fear, in welcome. He responds with a chuff, circles once, and lies down. Sprig presses against the mesh, head first. Thorn noses the spot gently. They stay like that for a full 20 minutes, unmoving except for the rise and fall of their breath. Later, reviewing footage from the clinic cameras, Nolan says quietly, "This is what people mean when they say healing isn't linear. It's relational." Sabrina, watching beside him, nods. And sometimes, it's wild. The bond that broke the rules. The day of the final release assessment arrives with clear skies and the crisp scent of fir needles on the wind. The forest surrounding Sagewind glows in soft golds and silvers. It should be a day of triumph. For any other bobcat, it would be. The transport crate is prepped and padded with fresh pine straw. A mild sedative has been measured. The destination is a 28,000-acre protected habitat east of Lolo Pass, where game is plentiful and human presence minimal. Thorn's release has been scheduled down to the hour, but as the staff gather around the briefing table, the mood is heavy. Sprig is nowhere in sight. By design. Evelyn had asked Sabrina to keep him inside for the day, just to see what Thorn would do when Sprig's scent, his voice, his very presence, was gone. The answer comes quickly. Even before the sedative is administered, Thorn is pacing. Not with his usual rhythm, but erratic. Tail twitching, ears scanning. He growls when Evelyn approaches, not out of aggression, but disorientation. He knows, Sabrina says, her voice low. They administer the sedative as planned. Within minutes, Thorn becomes calm, his limbs loosening, eyes half closed. But the moment a soft mewl echoes from the main building, Sprig's cry, confused and searching. Thorn lifts his head and tries to stand. His muscles quiver with effort. His ears flick toward the sound. He's fighting it, Evelyn murmurs. Even sedated. The team exchanges glances. Sabrina's radio crackles. "I didn't mean to," comes Nolan's voice. "He just saw me through the door." He started crying. Thorn is on his feet now, wobbling but upright. His eyes wide, his breathing sharp. They finish loading him into the crate. He thrashes once, then again. Not violently, not dangerously, just desperately. "Where's Sprig?" Sabrina whispers, not even sure if she's asking herself or the team. "He's responding to separation," Marcus says. "Not sedation, separation." Protocol says they should move. Get Thorn into the transport van while the medication still holds. Drive the 2 hours. Release him with a tracking collar. Close the file. But protocol doesn't hear the way Thorn is calling. Short, clipped vocalizations that are somewhere between a chirr and a sob. And it certainly doesn't know what to make of the way Sprig, now being held in Nolan's arms across the building, is crying in return. Loudly, sharply, as though something vital is being taken from him. Evelyn closes her eyes. "We postpone." Marcus nods, already lifting the radio. "Calling Tessa," By sunset, she's on her way. When she arrives the next afternoon, her truck smells like pine shavings and orange peel. Her boots are caked in red dust from her mountain enclosures. She walks with the slow confidence of someone who has seen more than a few miracles and refused to call them anything less. She tours the facility, reviews the reports, watches the video footage, but she wants more. "I'd like to observe them together," she says. "Not in contact, just close." They agree. Sprig is brought out in his crate. He's bigger now, nearly 7 weeks old, his white fur grown in fully, eyes alert. He still walks with kitten clumsiness, but there's power in his steps. Thorn is already at the mesh, sitting as if he's been waiting all morning. When he sees the crate, he stands. He doesn't vocalize. He simply lowers his head to the mesh. Sprig approaches, chirps, rubs the crate wall, lies down. The interaction is calm, familiar, effortless. After an hour, Tessa speaks. "This is a bond," she says. "Not a fluke, not imprinting, not delayed instinct, a bond." She describes it in technical terms: alloparenting, trauma linking, cross-species socialization. But her conclusion is personal. If you release him, he will fail. No one argues. He might survive for a few weeks, a few months, but he'll search for the scent, the sound, for the kitten. And when he can't find it, he'll either come back here or die trying. "And Sprig?" Evelyn asks. Tessa sighs. "He'll live, but something essential will be missing. He was born into absence, into fear, and somehow, against every odd, that hole was filled. You don't just take that away." Everyone knows what this means. A wild animal will not be returned to the wild. A domestic animal will not be adopted out. Instead, both will be rehomed to a sanctuary designed not just for survival, but for emotional permanence. At Long Pines, they'll live together. Separate quarters, shared boundaries, supervised interactions at first, gradual introductions, but ultimately, a home where the only thing that matters is well-being. Not taxonomy, not precedent. Just the sacred, strange reality of a bond that refuses to break. By the time the sun sets over the sawtooths, the transfer forms are signed, and Thorn, still watching the kitten from his enclosure, finally lies down and sleeps. Not from sedation, but from peace. Home between the pines. The van rumbles along the edge of the Salmon Chalice National Forest, winding through dirt roads that lead deep into the heart of Long Pines Sanctuary. The trees here are older, tall ponderosa and Douglas firs, with bark like puzzle pieces and needles that shimmer in soft wind. A river curls through the property's eastern border, cold and clear even in the spring thaw. Inside the vehicle, Sprig is tucked into a padded carrier, his body curled loosely, eyes wide and curious. He's older now, 8 weeks, and bright with the energy of youth. His coat has grown fluffy and strong, his tail flicking rhythmically with every new scent that seeps through the vents. Thorn rides just behind him, inside a reinforced transport crate built for apex predators. The Bobcat is calm but watchful. He hasn't vocalized since they left Sagewind, but he hasn't taken his eyes off the direction of Sprig's crate either. When the van finally pulls through the sanctuary gate, the sun is slanting low, casting honey-colored light across the treetops. Tessa Raines is waiting. She's prepared the enclosure for days, clearing bramble, adding climbing logs, installing double gates, and an adjoining indoor shelter warmed by radiant flooring. The space is nearly an acre, designed to mimic the bobcat's natural terrain. High perches, hidden burrows, even a small circulating water feature with shallows for play. But the most important feature is less visible: a viewing corridor, a safe, separate tunnel where Sprig can observe, explore, and interact with Thorn through mesh. No risk, no contact yet, just presence. We start slowly, Tessa explains, as she supervises the unloading. We watch their cues, not ours. Evelyn, who has driven up with the team from Sagewind, nods in agreement. Thorn is the first to enter. He emerges from the crate with slow steps, muscles taut, nose high in the air. He pads forward cautiously, tail low, scanning his new domain. He circles the perimeter once, then pauses to scent a rock, pressing his cheeks along its edge in a territorial claim. Then he climbs, 3 perches in swift succession, until he reaches the highest platform, overlooking the entire space. Only then does he settle. Sprig is carried to the adjoining indoor section. His smaller pen is lined with fleece and hay, equipped with toys and food bowls, but he ignores all of it. He stands at the mesh wall, nose twitching. Thorn senses him before anyone else. He perks up, ears forward. Then, without hesitation, he descends from his perch and moves to the dividing wall. He sits. Sprig squeaks. The sound breaks whatever distance the wall might create. The kitten lies down, curling near the mesh. Thorn mirrors him. There is no fanfare, no grand moment, only stillness, only belonging. For the next 2 weeks, the staff of Long Pines monitor their interaction. At first, Sprig is brought to the wall twice daily, then 3 times. By day 6, he's sleeping beside the mesh overnight, his small body pressed to the barrier. Thorn rarely leaves the spot. They begin rotating their meals together, separate but synchronized. Both animals eat more, rest more, groom more. By week 3, Tessa makes a decision. It's time. They stage the introduction with utmost caution. 2 staff inside the perimeter, multiple exits, instant access to recall queues and safe zones. Sprig is placed in the shared space first, inside a secure, soft crate. Thorn enters moments later. At the sight of the kitten, he churrs, low, soft, and drawn out like a breath. Sprig chirps in return, paws pressing against the crate door. When the latch opens, the kitten steps out slowly, tail low, body cautious. Thorn doesn't move. He only lowers his head. Sprig approaches. Their noses touch. Then slowly, Thorn circles once, just once, before curling around the kitten like a shield. He begins to groom him, long, slow licks across the head, then the shoulders. Sprig purrs, wriggling closer until his tiny frame is nestled fully beneath the bobcat's much larger body. A hush settles over the enclosure. Even the wind seems to still. Tessa blinks back tears. "Welcome home," she says. After that day, the 2 are rarely apart. They sleep curled in the crook of a climbing branch. Sprig sprawled across Thorn's back like a blanket. They eat beside each other, play beside each other, watch birds pass overhead in the quiet silence of animals who no longer search, because they've already found what matters. The Sagewind staff visit twice in the following months. The first time, Thorn is cautious, hovering near Sprig, his protective instincts sharp. But Sprig runs to Sabrina immediately, mewing his bright, curious hello, nuzzling her hand, before returning to his guardian's side. The second time, in late summer, the bond is seamless. Thorn allows Sabrina to approach, and for the first time, he leans into her palm. Not for food, not from fear, but from memory, from gratitude. Later, Evelyn watches them from the viewing deck, notebook in hand, though she hasn't written in it once. She turns to Tessa. "What do we call this?" Tessa shrugs. "We call it real." There's a soft chirp, then a low purr. And beneath the towering pines of Idaho, two hearts beat together in rhythm, not wild and tame, not predator and prey, just companions. Autumn comes slowly to long pines. The nights lengthen, the mornings glisten with frost, and the trees, once green and soft, blush gold at the tips, like they're remembering how to sleep. In the enclosure at the far end of the sanctuary, beneath a sky carved with stars, two shapes move together in the dark. One large, wild, quiet as dusk. One small, domestic, bright as morning. Thorn and Sprig. They are older now. Sprig nearing 6 months. Leaner and longer with the first signs of adult grace. His coat has deepened into snowy cream. His paws large for his frame, as if preparing for something more. Thorn, still muscled and formidable, shows new softness around his eyes, his movements more languid, less guarded. Their days follow a rhythm as reliable as sun and moon. Mornings begin with perch patrol, Thorn ascending the high logs to survey the grounds, Sprig bounding after him like a wobbly shadow. Then comes the sun-bathing stretch, followed by shared meals, gentle chases, and long naps beneath their favorite cedar. And always, at dusk, the stillness. This is when the staff notice it most. The ritual. Sprig presses close to Thorn's side, eyes half-lidded, ears flicking only at the softest sounds. Thorn wraps one paw gently over him like a promise. Sometimes he grooms the kitten, sometimes he doesn't, but always he stays near. The wind rustles the trees. A barred owl calls. And beneath it all, the faint vibration of Thorn's purr rises from the earth like a second heartbeat. It's the sound of belonging, of a story that didn't follow the rules, a story that didn't end with the forest reclaiming its own, or with separation in the name of purity, but one that found something better, healing not through release but through relationship. Visitors to Long Pines often stop at the enclosure, drawn by something they can't quite name. They fall quiet, watching the bobcat and the white cat move through the underbrush in tandem, their bodies brushing, their eyes alert but peaceful. Some ask how it's possible. Tessa always smiles and says, "You'll have to ask them." Others just nod. Sit for a while, then walk away changed, because watching them is like watching a campfire. Warm, hypnotic, impossible to forget. 6 months after their transfer, a local journalist writes a short feature about them. The story spreads, first across Idaho, then beyond. Donations pour in for the sanctuary. Messages arrive from children, from elderly couples, from hospitals and shelters and faraway cities. One child writes, "I think the bobcat just wanted a family." Another, "I have a cat who follows me like that. I didn't know animals could love this much." Evelyn frames those notes and hangs them in the Sagewind break room. It reminds her, on hard days, long nights, that sometimes their work isn't just about mending wounds. Sometimes it's about protecting the rarest things of all: connection, devotion, unseen bonds. Because what Thorn and Sprig found wasn't a fluke of biology or a glitch in behavior. It was something older than science, older than grief, something wild, something true. At the sanctuary, as the last light fades into indigo, Thorn rises from his spot beneath the tree. He stretches, yawns, and steps carefully over the fallen needles. Sprig follows at his side, quiet, quick, a flicker of pale fur in the darkness. They climb together onto their sleeping platform, weathered cedar warmed by the day's sun. Sprig circles once, then curls beneath Thorn's arm. Thorn lowers his head. Their breath rises together, steady and soft. The wind hushes, the forest quiets, and in that stillness, the world feels whole. Not perfect, not fixed, but whole. Like a heartbeat remembered, like a promise kept, like a story that chose love instead of logic and was better for it. So if you've ever wondered whether animals can feel the things we do, if you've ever doubted that healing can take unexpected forms, let this be your proof. Two creatures, two losses, one bond, and the lesson they leave behind. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is not let go. It's to stay, to wrap a paw around something smaller, to curl around someone we weren't supposed to love, and choose them anyway. At Paw Prints and Stories, we believe that some tales don't need embellishment. They just need room to breathe. So if this story touched you, if it softened something tired inside, consider joining us for more quiet, true things. We tell them slowly, and we tell them with care. Because sometimes, the world needs more stories that whisper instead of shout.